Hello, everybody. My name is Anil Kumar Rajvanshi. I run a small rural NGO called Nimkar Agriculture Research Institute in Western Maharashtra in a place called Fulton. I work in the areas of renewable energy and I also have interest in spirituality and I have written quite a number of books on them. And what I'm going to talk today about is my seventh book called What is Thought? It is basically nothing else but the neurobiological and physical basis of thought production, transmission, and interaction with matter. And I think it's a very unique things that I'm going to present, and I hope you enjoy listening to this. This book has been written in four sections. The first section is thought, the second section is memory production and removal, the third section is thought transmission, and the final section is interaction of thought with matter. In 2004, I wrote my first book entitled Nature of Human Thought. In it and in subsequent edition, basically the second edition, which I wrote in 2010, I try to cover some ideas on how thought is formed and transmitted. The ideas were speculative in nature, but I tried my best with the knowledge available at the time to explain the mechanism of how thought could be formed in the brain and transmitted. The basic framework was explained, but the details were missing. Since then, I have thought a little more about the subject and I present in this booklet. It is a booklet because it is just 34 page, a possible mechanism of neurobiological and physical basis of thought production and memory formation. And furthermore, a possible mechanism on how it is transmitted and its interaction with matter and gravity. I also speculate on the unexplored possibilities which might provide a detailed mathematical foundation of the nature of individual thought. As we all know that most of us, almost all of us, sometime or the other in our life have gone through the experience of feeling that somebody is following or watching us. Whether it is a human being or an animal, it makes us turn our neck. So, what it is and try to investigate it. Similarly, there have been innumerable instances where people and animals have sensed danger much before it strikes them. What is the nature of that signal that tells our mind that somebody is watching us intently or there is a lurking danger? And how is that signal generated and sent from the pursuer's brain? Or, in other words, what is thought and how it is generated and transmitted? I have been exploring and writing about these issues since 1977, though the desire to understand them started from my childhood. When the age of 13 or 14, I started doing very deep meditation and practicing spirituality in earnest. And these ideas, since 1977, were initially written down in a diary form and then distilled in my first book called Nature of Human Thought, which was published in 2004 and its second edition in 2010. Recently, I have written another book called Exploring the Mind of God: How Technology Guided by Spirituality Can Lead to Happiness, which extends and explores the issues of mind matter interaction further. Again, the details were missing, and so in this booklet, uh, titled What is Thought, I have tried to explain them based on the existing physical laws. Most of the times, scientists scoff at these conjectural ideas and termed them pseudoscience. However, if it in early 1800s somebody had told mankind about Einstein's theory of relativity and space-time continuum, people would have had the same reaction as today's so-called hardcore scientists have about mind matter subjects. I believe that the black magic of today is often the science of tomorrow. The spirit of science encourages us to conjecture and our imagination to flower, and the only validity of such conjectures is the proof from experiments. It is my firm belief that we should have an open mind about mind matter interaction and try to figure out how it could be possible. And therefore, this booklet is for those readers who have an open mind about such possibilities. So, the structure of the booklet is as follows. The booklet is divided into four sections. The first section deals with thought production, a novel concept of thought as a hologram based on biophotons production in the synaptic cleft has been introduced and developed. The second section talks about the nature of memory, its production, its possible location in the brain and outside it, and some possible mechanism of its removal. The third section talks about how thought can be transmitted from the brain and what laws could make it happen. Connected with this is the process of knowledge perception, where the novel concept of quantum entanglement is used to describe it. And finally, the last section is about how human thought could interact with matter and gravity. In the ultimate analysis, this interaction with gravity may allow us eventually to get out of the gravity field. Some speculative ideas on how it may happen, based on the concept of deep thought as a soliton, are explored in this section. All the references to research articles are given as links in the text, and in this podcast, the description provides the uh, link to the book, and the listeners, are requested to please look at this link so that you can access the research articles. I have been working on the subject of what is thought on and off for the last 50 years. The trigger was a certain idea that came to me in 1977 that human thought and gravity are related. This happened in Gainesville, Florida, where I was deeply involved in my PhD work at University of Florida, and this work was on solar energy, and the idea of gravity was as far removed from my mind as the earth from the sun. Yet, this sudden and unexpected idea was so powerful that it caught hold of my mind for the next 4 to 5 months, and I could hardly concentrate on anything else. Since this idea came so suddenly and powerfully, I was convinced that it was true, otherwise, it would not have come. In 1981, I came back to India to work on the rural development in our small NGO called Nimkar Agriculture Research Institute, and so I could not focus on mind matter and spirituality matters. And I therefore could only take up seriously the matter of spirituality and understanding of human thought in early 2000. I am always reminded of Einstein's words of wisdom, where he said that for somebody to do deep thinking on any issue, he should lock himself in a lighthouse. With no distractions, the focus is achieved. My small institute is my lighthouse, and I feel very blessed and grateful to higher powers who have guided me and allowed me to focus on this and other deep issues. And whatever little truth I have been able to glean has given me great joy and happiness. The major source of inspiration for writing this booklet has been Patanjali Yoga Sutras. I have been guided by the spirit of sage Patanjali in the area of human thought and mind matter interaction. The more I study his sutras, the more I realize the ocean of knowledge in his writings. I have made this e-booklet freely available on the net for wider circulation, and also because of my belief that knowledge should be freely available. And this is my seventh book, and for other books authored by me, I would request you to please follow my writing site, and all the links to these sites have been given in the description of this podcast. I am extremely grateful to my wife Nandini Nimkar for editing it, and to my colleague Shri S.S. Rao for typing umpteen drafts. And also special thanks are due to Shri Rahul Pisharodi for designing the cover. So happy listening, and this was the end of preface. Now I'll talk about section 1 of the book called Thought. Almost all of us, sometime or other in our life, have gone through the experience of feeling that somebody is following or watching us. Whether it is a human being or an animal, it makes us turn our neck to see what it is and investigate. Similarly, there have been innumerable instances where people and animals have sensed danger before it strikes them. So, what is the nature of the signal that tells our mind that somebody is watching us intently or there is a lurking danger, and how is that signal generated and sent from the pursuer's brain? Or, in other words, what is thought and how it is generated and transmitted? Since time immemorial, mankind has thought, discussed, and written about the origin of human thought. Religious writings are basically a discussion on it. Perhaps the greatest treatise on it has been Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which to my mind is still one of the most definitive and scientific writings on the control of human thought. Patanjali's book is the oldest book on yoga. It is believed that he wrote this book sometime in 300 BC or even earlier, though there is still dispute about the date. Sage Patanjali defines yoga as a control of thought waves. This is probably the first definition of yoga. He then describes how through yoga one can produce concentration and how this concentrated thought can be used to gain physical and spiritual powers for a person's ultimate enlightenment. Interestingly enough, Sage Patanjali does not address the central question of how and where the thought originates in the brain, but gives details on how to control it for achieving mastery over natural forces. However, recent developments in the brain research make it possible to understand thought, mind, and consciousness. And this is what we have discussed in this book. Generally, human thought has been considered by philosophers, religious leaders, etc., as non material in nature. However, I believe a result, which is a thought, produced by a physical brain has to be physical in nature and should be governed by physical laws. I will therefore attempt to throw light on what these laws could be. Most of the concepts presented here are intuitive in nature with very little mathematical formulation. Scientists have conducted many studies all over the world to find out how the brain works. Magnetic resonance imaging or MRI techniques, which are non-invasive in nature, are normally used in mapping the brain. Recently, scientists have started using functional MRI or called fMRI for sharper images. Thus, fMRI scans are taken of the brain under different stimuli, which show up on the computer screen as maps of liquid or blood flow in the brain. Scientists then say that the maximum place where maximum blood is flowing is the area where thought of a particular nature is generated. Yet no mechanism has been put forward on how thought is produced. So I will now discuss human thought production. It is an accepted fact that a thought is produced when a brain neurons fire. There are close to 80 to 100 billion neurons in the brain. The exact figure is not known. For a simple thought like what is the color of the flower, excuse me, form of a cat or a dog, etc., a small portion of the neurons fire, but in deep concentration, leading to samadhi and sanyam. And Patanjali calls sanyam as a combination of concentration, contemplation on a single subject or object for a very long time. During this process, almost all the neurons fire to produce a deep thought. Thus, the difference between a deep and a shallow thought is its intensity and duration. When neurons fire, they communicate with each other by forming neural pathways. Activation of neural pathways in turn triggers firing of neurons. This activation is triggered either by signals from sense organs or stimulation of certain memory space in the brain. Firing of neurons helps them to communicate with each other. During this communication, electrical signal from a neuron is converted into chemicals or called neurotransmitters and transmitted across the synaptic cleft to another neuron where it is again converted into electrical signal for the onward journey. I have shown in the book the diagrams of synaptic cleft and neurons, and I would urge the listeners to please go to the website of the book and see these diagrams. Synaptic cleft is a tiny space of about 20 nanometers between an axon and a dendrite and is a place where two neurons exchange information via neurotransmitters. A neuron has three parts. At one end is a dendrite, which accepts the neurotransmitters from the other neurons, the central nucleus, which is the heart of neuron, and a long nerve fiber called axon, whose end, or a synapse, releases the neurotransmitters for transmitting to another neuron. A large number of neurons connected like this forms a neural pathway. So why did nature produce this type of diode-based communication system where the electrical signal from the neuron which goes in one direction only is first converted into chemicals, neurotransmitters, and transmitted through the synaptic cleft and again converted back into the electrical signal in the next neuron? A possible answer could be that during this conversation in synaptic cleft, weak biophotons are produced, which are the signature of thought. This is the central theme of what is thought. Anytime a chemical reaction takes place and the production of neurotransmitters and their acceptance in the neurotransmitter receptor in the other neuron are such reaction and they produce weak photons. This is the nature of the chemical bond. Anytime a reaction takes place, weak photons are produced. Weak photon production was experimentally observed in the brain in the late 2010s when scientists detected them being emitted during the firing of neurons and transfer of neurotransmitters across the synaptic cleft. Scientists were still not sure on what way the brain uses these photons, but speculated that somehow they may help in increasing the communication between various parts of the brain. The weak photons produced have broad spectrum in the range of 200 to 950 nanometer, though we are not yet sure what is the peak of the emission. In this range, the cerebrospinal fluid, which covers the whole brain and is also between the synapse and every part, is 99% water, is nearly transparent. Thus, the biophotons can easily communicate with each other across the brain. I conjecture that these photons from large number of neural pathways synchronize via a nonlinear process to form a three-dimensional hologram which we can call thought. Hence, the origin of thought probably occurs in synaptic clefts. Each thought, however, is a result of activation of a unique set of neural pathways, though we still do not know how many neural pathways are needed for it. In fact, the formation of such a unique neural pathways is the memory. So, neural pathways are the memory, and the neurons firing in these pathways produce a thought. With practice and constant flow of electrical signals through these neural pathways, memory of that particular object gets strengthened. But how do the photons from millions of synapses synchronize and form a coherent thought? For that, we will have to examine the brain complexity, understand large number mathematics, and possible synchronization mechanism. So I will talk now about the brain complexity and the synchronization of the thought photons. Just to give a sense of complexity of the brain, let us look at the number of possible neural pathways in the brain. There are close to 80 to 100 billion neurons in the brain, and each neuron has many dendrites and axons which connect it to the other neurons. And the recent scientific evidence also suggests that besides neurons, another type of cells called glial cells may also take part in communication. Glial cells outnumber neurons by 9 to 1 and can modify the signals transmitted by each neuron. There are therefore estimates that 10 to the power 15 synapses in the brain may be involved in communication. Thus, the number of different combinations for neural pathways and thought production are mind-boggling. That is the reason why human mind can generate millions and zillions of thoughts. However, the thoughts from each synapse must be synchronized with others to produce a stable thought structure. This synchronization takes place via the positive feedback type mechanism so that each photon is influenced by others and is guided by an entity called I, or also called ego, will, sense of identity, etc. etc. This is similar to the mechanism where fireflies in large numbers synchronize their firing when they are together. I conjecture that this type of synchronization might produce a hologram or a thought hologram. Ego acts like a symphony director and helps provide the necessary energy and focus to maintain a given thought for a certain time. It is also constantly compares it with the signals from outside, those we receive through our senses, to give us a sense of reality. We still do not completely understand how ego or I can influence this process, but just like the music conductor who determines which part of the orchestra plays for how long, the ego or I decides how long a particular thought will remain in the vision field. This process is called concentration and seems to also exist in other animals. With practice, concentration becomes strong till a person can nearly make all 80 to 100 billion neurons fire in a laser like fashion for a long time on a single thought. This is the genesis of meditation or samadhi and results in Sanyam, according to sage Patanjali. According to him, Sanyam done on any subject results in his complete knowledge. Thus, deep concentration is the basis by which all great discoveries in science, art, and any other human endeavor are made. This deep thought produced continuously also helps in dissolving the memory knots of the brain, since this activity requires increased number of neural pathways for its processing and hence loosening of the existing memories. We'll discuss this in details in the next section or the section 2. Patanjali also says that removing of memory knots or sanskars as he calls them makes the mind like a crystal so that any object or subject occupies the whole brain when we are thinking about it. Or, in other words, when memory knots are resolved, the processing power of the brain increases exponentially and allows the brain to focus on a single object or subject in a laser like manner. Hence, the reference to crystal like clarity of the brain. The production of weak photons for thought formation could also be the reason why many yogis have experienced seeing white light during intense meditation. Similarly, the observation of white light by persons during near death experience or NDE could be an outcome of nearly all the brain neurons firing during the final exit. As I have shown that that this is a general mechanism of how a thought could be formed. However, there are unexplored possibilities, and we have not been able to provide a detailed mathematical formulation for thought formation. And so here are some of the unexplored and speculative possibilities which can give a mathematical formulation for the thought production. So number one, we still do not know how many neurotransmitters are released per firing of neuron. There are speculations that it is anywhere between 2 and 20, but we do not know. Also, the molecular structure of each neurotransmitter and the receptor is not fully understood. Besides, how many of these neurotransmitters are captured by receptors of the next neuron is also not known. And the problem is compounded by the fact that we do not have the technology to see the real-time happenings in the synapse, which I showed is 20 nanometers only. And so till we know what exactly is happening, these are all speculations. However, if we can find the number of neurotransmitters released and their capture by receptors, then the energy and frequency of biophotons can be calculated and a possible hologram could be created from this data. That, to my mind, will be the first attempt on calculating the structure of a single thought. Hello, this is the audio podcast of my book, What is Thought? In my last podcast, I discussed, I talked about preface and the first section, and now today I will talk about section 2, which is memory production and removal. The book is available on the internet. It is freely available, and I would urge the listeners to please go to the link of the book, which is in the description of this podcast. So this is section 2, which is memory production and removal. We are all defined by our memories. They are the only things we can call our own. All our experiences, ego, I, and our existence is a sum and substance of our lifetime memories. They guide us on our future journey in life. Until the end of our existence, those memories are with us. Most of our memories can be divided into pleasant and unpleasant ones. These memories give rise to a whole range of emotions: love, hatred, jealousy, fear, happiness, etc. To live a good and happy life, we should strive to have mostly pleasant memories and see how the unpleasant ones can be reduced or removed. One of the main tenets of Indian yogic system is the complete removal of our memories at the time of death or final exit, so that we are liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Indian yogic system also says that if the memories exist, then this leads to the rebirth, and the rebirth is guided by these memories. But what are the memories, and where in the brain they reside, or how are they formed, and what is the possible mechanism of their removal? We will try to explore and explain these issues in this podcast, and this is based on the podcast, the last time's podcast, in which I talked about the section 1, how thought is produced. So, what has been the previous research in memory? Memory, its origin and spatial location in the brain has been researched for hundreds of years. Extensive literature on it exists, and hence, this podcast is not a place to write or to talk about the history of memory research, but we will briefly touch the salient features of previous research. One of the seminal works on memory was done by Eric Kandel, who got the 2000 Nobel Prize for his work on this subject. Kandel's main discovery was that synapse plays an important role in the memory formation and the consolidation of memory changes and synapse and the consolidation of memory changes in the synapse itself. Though this pioneering work on neurobiological basis of memory showed the process of memory formation and consolidation in few neurons, but it did not show where the memory is located and how is it related to consciousness. At the same time, the existing theories on neurobiological basis of memory formation also do not explain the pliability and plasticity of neurons and their neural networks. Scientists have recently also found that with time, the original neural networks shift spatially and yet are able to retain the same memory. How this happens is still a mystery, and thus we do not know where the memory exists and exactly what it is. In my talk, I will try to throw some light on this aspect. So, memory formation. As we saw in the last talk, memories are nothing else but the arrangement of neural pathways and the sequence of their firing. Neural pathways are made the moment brain starts forming in the womb. Very rudimentary memory of the movement, swallowing, etc. starts in the second and third trimester of pregnancy. Prenatal memory, as it is called, starts forming around 30 weeks after the conception. After this time, the fetus is affected by the food the mother consumes, and a fair amount of good data exists on how alcohol and drug use by the mothers at this stage affect the children later in life. The moment a child is born, there is an explosion in memory formation. A child's brain is like a sponge for information intake, since neural pathways must be established. So the sound, smell, and other sensory organs start playing and they start sending signals to the brain for the formation of neural pathways. Nevertheless, I feel that the basic memory which exists in every life form at the time of birth is the preservation of its form. How this memory is inbuilt in the genetic code is still a mystery. This form preservation memory gives rise to emotions like fear and the desire to procreate or have sex, both basic instincts to preserve the form. And both these memories are eternal to life and part of the evolutionary process. However, the first solid memories are those when eyes start focusing. The input signals from the eyes, which are the maximum to the brain, are coordinated with these from the ears and help establish and stimulate the neural pathways, which results in the formation of random thought hologram. This hologram is compared with the actual object, and when after many comparisons the exact match takes place, then a memory is etched in the brain. The comparer of reality and hologram in this case is the nascent ego of the child, which is still developing but is not strong enough to focus on a particular thing for a long time. This results in memories being formed and forgotten, and though the brain at this stage is like a sponge for absorbing information, the lack of focus does not allow the memories to become strong. This is the reason why children have very few memories till the age of 2 and 3 years. With the developing of ego as we age, longer focus results and hence a stronger memory is formed. The memory is further strengthened when the child repeatedly performs the process of seeing, validating, and memorizing. This also helps in making neural pathways stronger when the child repeatedly produces the thought hologram of a given object. Children are therefore particularly good at doing mundane things repeatedly because this is how they set up and consolidate their memories. Since the brain is virgin in childhood, these repeated early neural pathways produce very strong memories, and then thus some of the childhood memories after the age of 3 to 4 years are very powerful. Many times the parents get exasperated with a child repeatedly performing these mundane actions and scold the child. This should not be done because scolding creates fear complex memories and the new learning is retarded. As we go older, this process of memory formation and consolidation is repeated and the whole network of neural pathways is formed. The sum and substance of our experiences and memories then give rise to our sense of self and is the genesis of ego. If memory is not strengthened by repeated experiences, then these neural pathways are used for something else and hence the memory becomes weak and may be lost, as happens in children till the age of 2 to 3 years. Therefore, chanting, rote learning, and associating the images with signposts, etc., are the ways of strengthening the memory. However, there are some people who possess photographic memory. They can immediately remember most of the details the moment they become aware of it. This happens because of their brain processes superior processing power, and this ability is mostly inborn and may have a genetic element to it. We still do not know how it happens, but there are a large number of cases in which people who are born with photographic memory. Our memory formation is based on a sequence of events received through our senses, and hence the time is embedded in the memories. They are replayed as a movie, and thus a sequence of events tell us about the passage of time. And I believe that this is the genesis of time perception that we have. Since the neural pathways are formed sequentially, hence during recall, one set of neural pathways trigger another set. It is therefore quite possible that the neural pathways of such events may reside close to each other in the brain, otherwise sequencing may be difficult. This triggering of sets of neural pathways is probably facilitated by the ego. When ego becomes weak, the triggering is reduced and the sequence is lost. This happens temporarily during the dreaming and permanently in dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and other brain maladies. The proximity of neural pathways may also explain why one type of thought triggers other thoughts of similar nature. Thus, both dark and pleasant thoughts come in bunches. Now, I will talk about memory removal. In everybody's life, there are both painful and happy memories. It will be wonderful if somehow we can get the ability to reduce or remove these painful memories. Then we can have a better and happier life. Most people think that if we do not think about the painful memories, then they are gone. But painful memories produce very strong psychological knots which remain buried in the brain. And when by some trigger they get reactivated, the pain comes back with a tremendous force. And to remove this pain, a mechanism of actively removing such memories is necessary. A possible mechanism of memory removal is to focus on a single thought for an exceptionally long time. It is called Sanyam in Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Production of Sanyam requires large number of neural pathways since huge processing power is needed. This may help in the removal of other memories since those neural pathways are used for this particular thought. With the discipline, willpower, and passage of time, the brain can become very pliable so that Sanyam results effortlessly. As Patanjali says in his Yoga Sutras, when a brain becomes powerful and nimble, it is like a pure crystal which takes the color and the shape of the object which comes in its view. Such a brain is therefore capable to focus like a laser on anything that occupies its vision field. This process has also been corroborated by recent work in memory formation, where scientists have shown that by thinking deeply on certain objects, the synapses are weakened for a short time. They can then be modified to form pathways for other memories. This plasticity of memory is one reason why sometimes in extreme circumstances of brain surgery and removal of some parts of the brain, it can still allow a patient to work and form new neural pathways and hence memories. Memory removal is a most important aspect of Indian yogic system, which asserts that this leads to liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth. Also, with less memory attached to our soul during the final exit, we can tunnel through the drag of gravity and other souls and reach the other worlds. This, to my mind, is the easiest way to get out of the Earth's gravity field. Memory removal also helps in unraveling of memory knots, mostly made by emotional incidents, and helps in resolving emotional conflicts. There are many instances where the resolution of such conflicts helped people die peacefully. Another way to remove unpleasant memories is to cultivate the habit of continuously thinking about the pleasant incidences that have happened in our lives. It is a difficult process, but if tried regularly, could help in resolving unhappy memories. Many times, it happens that our PCs, laptops, and other computing devices become slow since they are cluttered with folders and other materials which we do not need and take up the working memory space. After downloading most of the information on an external disk, the memory of the PC is restored and it functions faster and smoothly. In the same way, uncluttering of the brain by removing the psychological memory knots will allow it to function properly and faster. Nevertheless, there are other powerful and intense memories which are the result of emotional and painful episodes. These episodes, when they occur, result in occupying the whole brain so that the focus of the brain is single pointed. It is almost like a samadhi. These memories are very difficult to erase but necessary to be removed for a happy life. Can memories exist outside the human brain? It is possible that powerful emotional memories can form a deep thought, resulting in a stable soliton, and can exist for a long time. I will talk about the nature of soliton in the next section, and I conjecture that such stable memories may reside in what I call as a knowledge space. Knowledge space could be the equivalent to external hard disk where our strongest memories get stored automatically. I define knowledge space as a space which may contain information structures or memories which are very stable and will remain there for a very long time. This is similar to cloud storage. Our cloud storage is connected to our devices via cables and processors, whereas the knowledge space may be tethered to our gravitational field, and how memories can go and reside in chaos is discussed in the next section, which is on the transmission of thought. This knowledge space may also contain fundamental knowledge produced in the past and is continuously fed by the ever increasing knowledge from various civilizations as Earth travels around the Milky Way galaxy. A prepared and focused mind can access knowledge from this space, and I feel that great discoveries of mankind have come from such access. There are also indications that strong emotional memories may be attached to the inanimate objects. There is a fair amount of data from all over the world where the mediums have been able to access the memories from such objects, and it has resulted in new finds of buried ancient structures almost 15 to 20,000 years old, ability to tell sequence of events about unnatural deaths, and timelines of civilizations long gone and lost. It somehow seems that the physical objects, like a stone, bone, or any other object used by the people long dead, are somehow attached to the memories of these persons in knowledge space, and the mediums are able to access them. In scientific language, this ability is called intuitive archaeology. Such ability to recall the memories or past events of people by simply touching them was shown by Swami Vivekananda, the Indian spiritual leader. This ability is also mentioned in Patanjali Yoga's Darshan, where he says that by doing sanyam on other person's mind, a yogi gets knowledge of that person's thought waves but not the contents of his mind. It is also possible that the knowledge space may have templates of various life forms. The memories of life forms remain in knowledge space because these forms exist for an exceedingly long time, couple of million years. Thus, either a deep thought for a long time or nearly constant life forms for a long time produce these stable memories in knowledge space. Even if the physical form disintegrates, the ghost or the memories remain in this knowledge space. This memory of forms or templates may be the basis, besides the regular evolutionary forces, of a new life forms for a young, life sustaining planet as it comes across the knowledge space in its journey through space. We can also conjecture that the transfer of memories to knowledge space from our brain is via a filter. Thus, only deep emotional memories get transferred and mundane memories remain behind in the brain. This process helps to reduce the loading of chaos or the knowledge space. The mundane memories, however, need to be removed via the memory removal process outlined in the previous section. Can we remove our trace completely? In the modern internet and the World Wide Web, if we want to completely remove our trace, then firstly we need to format our PCs and then remove all the information from the web or the net. This is not easy since the deep web contains the archived material with which we have been associated, and it is exceedingly difficult to remove all of it. Thus, somehow and somewhere, the past can catch up with us. In the same way, we need to remove memories from the brain and those from the chaos or knowledge space to get complete liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Just like the hard disk can be formatted or cleaned when it is attached to the PC or a similar device, similarly, the cleaning of memories in the knowledge space can only be done by intense thinking via the human brain. And as Patanjali says in his Yoga Sutras, when the mutations of gunas cease to exist or cease to function, flow of time stops and nirvana results. This results in complete removal of trace memories and the liberation of yogi. Otherwise, the trace of our memories in knowledge space can force our rebirth either here on this planet or other planets. This could probably be the genesis of karma's concept so often mentioned in Indian philosophy. Hello, this is the third section of my book, What is Thought? In the previous first and second section, we discussed about how thought is formed, what is the nature, and where the memories are formed and can they be removed from the brain. In this section, which is the third section, we'll talk about thought transmission, how it is transmitted, and some interesting issues associated with the transmission process. Again, I have tried to use the existing neurobiological and physical laws in explaining all these processes, and I would urge the listeners again to go to the link of the full book, which is freely available on the net, to look at the references and decide for themselves whether what I am talking about makes sense or not. Very often we have felt that when we are thinking deeply about somebody, lo and behold, we get news about that person either by a letter, email, or phone. In this regards, there is a very interesting case about a celebrated a person called Hans Berger. He was the inventor of electroencephalogram or EEG, which measures the brain waves. Sometimes in 1893, when he was seriously hurt during horse riding, his sister, who stayed far away, immediately sensed his danger and condition and asked her father to send a telegram inquiring about him. Berger has written that he felt that this was a clear case of telepathy and it set him thinking about how this could have happened. He obviously felt that some information, some signal must have gone from him to his sister, and he wanted to find more about it. However, in doing that, he developed EEG to measure the brain waves in the hope that they somehow could be transmitted over long distances. What was lost to telepathy was again to the uh, medical world in the development of this very great device called EEG. Similarly, there have been many cases where some dogs know when their owners are coming home. What do they sense? How they sense it is what is covered in this section, and we'll talk about how the thought is transmitted and received by the receiver's brain. So, what is the signal that tells us about these things, and how is that signal transmitted to long distances? Or, in other words, what is telepathy? In this section, we will talk about how thought can be transmitted from one brain to another and a possible explanation of telepathy. We have seen in the previous sections how the generation of thought and its validation of the outside world through the signals received from our senses gives us a sense of reality. Besides, this internal churning in the brain makes us creative and gives us a sense of humanness. When we can resolve some of the memory knots through this internal churning, then it also gives us a sense of well being and happiness. All these activities require intense concentration because only with intense concentration the thought can be transmitted. Nevertheless, a deep thought, which is the result of tremendous concentration for a long time, is also a leaky thought. Whether we like it or not, it leaks from our brain. It not only helps us evaluate various scenarios, but is also automatically transmitted and has the effect on others' mind who are in the vicinity of the deep thinker. This results in mind bending experience or the sense of danger that some people have felt when they are in the presence of such beings. These thoughts can bring in the feelings of either peace and happiness or evil intentions, depending upon the personality and mental makeup of the center. So, how do we feel the presence of a being? Very often, people have felt a sense of well being and happiness just being in the presence of an enlightened human being. They don't have to speak, but you just feel when you are in the presence of an enlightened being. These beings continuously produce a thought of high quality which leaks from their brain and affects anybody who encounters it. Similarly, there are other human beings who are evil and continuously think ill of society and how to harm others. These evil thoughts also affect people and have been the cause of a lot of misery in the world. There have been some examples of this powerful brain interaction and which has been reported by UFO or the unidentified flying objects, abductees or the people who were abducted by the beings from the extraterrestrial beings who came in the UFOs. Most abductees felt very frightened when they encountered these alien beings. They felt as if their whole life was sucked out of them, and these encounters also wiped out all the memories of the event in the abductees. Sage Patanjali has alluded to such process in his Yoga Sutras when he says that a yogi not only can read the mind of others but can also take command of his or her mind and body. So these things have been written up in Patanjali Yoga Sutras and some people have encountered them in the interaction with a UFO. On a terrestrial level, these leaky thoughts from a powerful brain also creates an aura, either good or bad, around that person and is felt by everybody who encounters him or her. At present, this aura and thought cannot be transmitted by any known technological means like phones, video, internet, etc. The day we will be able to project or transmit them to large distances through our technology will be the day when man machine interface will vanish. Presently, a thought can only be transmitted by human brains. I conjecture that it can also be transmitted over long distances, and we will explore it in this essay. Nevertheless, in order to feel the presence of or aura, one's mind should also be sensitive to the feelings. A person devoid of such sensitivity cannot feel a presence. The mind is both a receiver and a broadcaster of strong thoughts, and a sensitive mind is able to receive them and feel the presence of the being. However, a sensitive mind is sometimes a curse because it can also be easily distracted by any strong thought it perceives. It therefore requires a great willpower to ward off influences from a powerful mind. We also sometimes hype ourselves into a state of awe in the presence of a well known personality and do not see the flaws in that person. This hype is, however, sensed by these personalities and they get an added boost to their energy levels. Besides, it also helps them to control their followers. Many orators and public figures have experienced and commented on this. Nevertheless, a genuine feeling of warmth, love, kindness, and humility can only be felt when in the presence of a great soul. Thus, if all of us follow our basic gut feelings when we meet somebody, and when we meet such souls, then we should be thankful for our luck. Such people's friendship should be cultivated and cherished. I also think this is a good way to judge a person's greatness, that what type of aura or thoughts he or she sends you and how you feel about it. One can create a benevolent presence by developing a calm mind. Calmness of mind comes from internal security, which is an outcome of spirituality. A poor person who is at peace with himself or herself can radiate a tremendous calmness and help spread it. There have been many instances where people have felt this calmness in the presence of great souls like Mahatma Gandhi and Vivekananda. It is not necessary that only the so called God men or well known figures have a presence. Quite a number of times, one can find such a presence in ordinary people. In fact, quite often, well known people are very troubled human beings. Their stakes in power, position, or money are very high, and higher the stakes are, higher is their insecurity. They therefore frequently radiate this insecurity, which tends to be quite unpleasant. So, how is thought transmitted, or how these thoughts, aura, presence radiated outside the brain and become leaky thoughts? Sage Patanjali has alluded to this in his sutras, which is he has written in section 3, 1 to 4. He says that by doing Sayyam, or a combination of concentration, retention, and assimilation in the process, as he calls it, total of these three is Sayyam. If done Sayyam on anything, it brings in great knowledge and wisdom. So obviously, there is an interaction of the mind with the object or subject of interest. Patanjali defines Sanyam as a combination of dhyan or concentration, dharan or keeping it in the vision field of our mind, and samadhi or complete immersion in the object or subject of focus and inquiry. When Sanyam is done on anything, Patanjali says a complete knowledge of the subject is achieved. This, to my mind, has been the basis of all great discoveries and inventions of the world. We have not been able to invent anything, we have always been able to discover because the knowledge exists and we just need to find it. And this happens when we have a Sanyam on anything that we want. Our theory of deep thought hologram and its leaky nature follows this approach. We perceive reality by producing the hologram and validating it with signals from our senses. With concentration, which is mediated by ego, we try to keep that hologram for a longer time in the vision field to evaluate the subject or object internally. With even greater concentration, this thought hologram acts like a laser because of its intensity, becomes leaky, and gets transmitted to the outside world. This transmission then allows this hologram to interact with the object or subject of our focus in an induced fit type arrangement and gives back to us the signal whether the information or our inference is correct or wrong. It's almost like a lock and key arrangement when the structure or the form of our hologram matches that of the subject or object we are trying to understand, then the knowledge results. But how is the signal from the object of focus received by our brain? For objects that we can see and feel, it is quite easy because our senses guide us in doing it. We can touch it, we can see it, we can feel whether what we are thinking about is what we are seeing and is a correct answer. But for thoughts, concepts, and subjects that we do not see and are beyond our reach, what is the mechanism? And I feel that the science of quantum entanglement may provide a possible answer. This is a very unique thing, and I hope the listeners can think deeply about it and decide for themselves whether this is correct or not. So, I described how knowledge perception can take place via quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement came from Einstein's theories, and Einstein used to always call it this as a spooky action at a distance. And this is a concept which states that when photons or even particles are created or generated, they are somehow entangled with each other in such a manner that the knowledge of one can describe the other, no matter how far apart they are. This is one of the greatest achievements of the quantum physics, that this entanglement is a very important uh, aspect of the particles, photons, etc. We can conjecture that our concentrated thought hologram that leaks out and interacts with the object or subject of our perception somehow changes the property of the hologram in the brain via the entanglement process. So when it gets uh, fitted with the knowledge through the fit process that we described before, that that entanglement that the it has with the hologram inside tells us immediately what is the knowledge. This continuous dialogue between these holograms via entanglement brings us the knowledge. The increased concentration makes it possible to increase the frequency and intensity of the holograms. It is quite possible that this intense thought behaves like a laser so that the attenuation is reduced and the induced fit type arrangement is established and maintained for a considerable amount of time. We have also discussed in the first section that thought holograms may have wavelength signature in the near and far infrared region, and we talked about till from to 300 to 950 nanometers, and the human skull and hair through which this thought has to go outside are also nearly transparent in this range, and hence it is possible that intense thought could easily be transmitted out of the brain. Besides, I feel that hair may also act like an antenna of such thought transfer and aid in the thought transmission and reception. I have written about this, and the listeners are requested to go and see this link where this was developed in a bigger, in a much more detailed manner. Normally, a thought inside the brain dissipates rapidly since many new thought holograms are being produced. This results in brain chatter that we all know about it. However, a thought which is produced with intense concentration and for a long time may be transmitted easily as explained earlier. The intensity of this hologram can also decide how far it can go since the 1 upon r square attenuation, or which is called as the inverse square law, could dilute it rapidly. So how does one produce a time stable thought hologram which can travel long distances? The science of soliton may be able to explain it. We talked about it very briefly in the previous section, and now I'll explain what is soliton and how it can be used to describe these very strong and powerful thoughts which can go to long distances and could be the basis of telepathy. Soliton is a wave which can remain stable for almost infinite time and can travel to great distances without dissipating. This is the nature of the soliton. These waves arise because of the far from equilibrium and hence non-linear nature of the wave phenomena and have been observed in liquids, gases, optics, and even space. When the conditions are right, which means that it becomes very intense non-linearly, or in non-linearity becomes intense, a critical threshold is achieved, and according to the catastrophe theory, solitron structure can be formed. The word soliton is apparently derived from solitary wave, which being stable acts almost like a particle, and hence soliton rhymes with electron. Concentrated thought hologram is a three-dimensional far from equilibrium wave and may follow the soliton laws. It can therefore be conjectured that a thought hologram, which is an outcome of tremendous concentration for a long time, can form a soliton. This thought hologram soliton may also interact with gravity and matter, and these are given in detail in the next section, which I'll talk later on. And also the ability of this soliton to travel long distances and remain stable could be the basis of clairvoyant powers that some yogis have exhibited and to a limited extent has been observed experimentally. Anecdotal evidence suggests that Aurobindo Ghosh, an Indian spiritual guru, had an ability to sense thought packets sent to him. Similar was the case with Swami Vivekananda, who could feel these thoughts coming from different places. Since thought solitons are very stable structures, it is tempting to think that they may form stable memories and may reside in knowledge space. These memories could also be the basis of karma that is talked about in the Indian philosophy. Now I'll talk about some interesting consequences of thought solitons and talk about how telepathy could be possible. The soliton nature of concentrated thought may also shed some light on how telepathy might work. The brain is both a sender and a receiver of thought hologram. A normal thought soliton can go to large distance carrying the information, but sometimes it also dissipates with time and distance. These are called dissipative solitons in the scientific literature, and hence may not be able to carry all the information of the thought to the receiver's brain. Nevertheless, it is possible that the dissipative soliton may still have enough information so that the receiving brain is able to reconstruct the message from it and produce a coherent image. This is not difficult to visualize since we do this all the time in trying to decipher the world. For example, sometimes a speech we hear is incoherent, but the brain has the capability to reconstruct it to make sense. Similarly, is a case of deciphering illegible writings. Our brain can extract and reconstruct coherent information from tiny bits of input signals, and we do this all the time. I feel that in the same way, complete information can be obtained from a limited thought hologram or the dissipative hologram, which may not contain the complete picture but a small bits. This makes sending and receiving telepathic signals easy and will use much less energy, but needs a sensitive brain which is capable of receiving such signals. A very powerful and non-dissipative soliton, on the other hand, is used for final exit or Mahasamadhi, and that is how you will see in the next section how some people have left their body by this process. Soliton can also explain the dream process or the dreaming process. During the sleep, ego is very weakened or nearly non-existent. Thus, the energy through the neural pathways during sleep is not focused and results in random brain chatter. This leads to thought holograms and dreams being produced in disjointed and haphazard manner. Nevertheless, during the episodes of non-existent ego, we have a very deep and relaxing sleep. The dream production follows the bell curve, where the average dream is what we dream all the time. It is disjointed, very shallow, and most of the times we do not even remember them. But the probability of dream production in outliers, or the tail of the bell curve as it is called, is very small, but still it is finite and exists. And I feel that this may create conditions for concentrated and leaky thoughts. And this brain condition during the sleep also becomes very receptive to the outside knowledge, and which may result in prophetic dreams that quite a number of people have had and which had produced great discoveries and inventions. Hello, I am now going to talk about the last section of my book, What is Thought? I have covered section 1 to 3 in my previous podcast, and now I'm going to talk about the fourth section. And this section is called How Thought Interacts with Matter. Throughout the history of human civilization, there have been many instances where the so-called miracles have been performed. These have included levitation, production of material things from the thin air, physical healing, etc. The nature of these miracles is the same, irrespective of religion and different civilizations. Some of their accounts have been exaggerated and found to be fraudulent, but a fair amount of data shows remarkable consistency in their nature and reporting. though the producers of such miracles have always claimed that God or higher forces and entities use them as medium, and so the thought and matter interaction takes place. However, I feel that these events have taken place because of the interaction of human thought with gravity and material surroundings. After all, a thought produced by the physical brain must be physical in nature and hence governed by certain scientific laws. Thus, a curiosity arose about which laws of science operate to make these things happen. And this essay is and the talk is my humble attempt in trying to understand them. I have been exploring and writing about these issues since 1977, though the desire to understand them started from my childhood. These ideas since 1977 were initially written in a diary form and then distilled in my first book, The Nature of Human Thought, which was published in 2004 and its second edition in 2010. Recently, I have written another book, Exploring the Mind of God: How Technology Guided by Spirituality Can Produce Happiness, which extends and explores mind matter interaction issues further. The present essay and consequently my talk expands further on most of the materials from these books. Now, most of the scientists scoff at these conjectural ideas and term them pseudoscience. These are so called mainstream scientists. However, if it in early 1800s somebody had told mankind about Einstein's relativity theory and the space-time continuum, people would have had the same reaction as today's so-called hardcore scientists have about mind-matter subjects. The black magic of today is often the science of tomorrow, and thus I feel that we should have an open mind in all these things. The spirit of science encourages us to conjecture and our imagination to flower, and the only validity of such conjectures is the proof from experiments. It is my firm belief that we should have an open mind about mind matter interaction and try to figure out how it could be possible. So, why study mind matter? Curiosity is one part, but a major reason is that it may lead to a quantum jump in the evolution of mankind. As we will show in subsequent sections, mind matter interaction is an obvious consequence of deep thought hologram production and transmission. This deep thought or Sanyam according to Patanjali Yoga Sutras helps us get enlightenment, gives us great happiness and joy, and leads to liberation from the cycle of birth and death. This is a major step towards the removal of pain. And the second reason why we want to study mind matter interaction is that this interaction may provide a mechanism for us to get out of the gravitational field of the earth and could make us an intergalactic traveling civilization. I firmly believe that our origins are extraterrestrial and we long to go back to our roots in distant galaxies and planets. And these were the other worlds, were the heavens of mythology in every civilization. So, what is thought and gravity interaction and how can they interact? As we discussed in section 3, deep thought soliton can remain stable and travel to long distances. This can only happen excuse me, when it can interact excuse me, with space-time matrix. Or in other words, how can thought and gravity be correlated? According to Albert Einstein, gravity is nothing else but a curvature of space-time continuum. and hence geometric in nature. It is my conjecture that since the structure of deep thought soliton is also geometric, it is possible that both gravity and deep thought may be related at a deeper level. Also, according to the general theory of gravitation, light bends around massive bodies. This is because the massive bodies distort the space-time matrix and the shortest path for light travel is geodesic. Hence, light appears to bend when it passes heavy bodies like the sun. This was one of the great triumphs of Einstein's theory of gravitation. Since gravity bends light, we can conjecture that by the principle of equivalence, that light should also bend the space-time matrix. This is a line of thinking we will employ in our quest to find the relationship between deep thought and gravity. Gravitation theory also shows that a combination of energy and momentum can curve space-time matrix. Though photons are massless particles, they have energy and momentum, two important attributes for bending space-time matrix. Hence, light traveling through it should be able to also change the matrix shape. However, the effect is very minuscule and extremely difficult to measure since photons have very little energy and momentum. Nevertheless, it could be possible that high intensity light should be able to deform it. Recently, some theoretical studies have shown the effect of lasers on space-time matrix deformation. Extrapolating on this idea, one can conjecture that laser-like deep thought soliton may deform the space-time matrix just like a mass would do and produce mechanical effects. This could be the basis of mind-matter interaction. However, the mechanical effects may be very feeble to observe. The science of resonance may be able to explain how these effects can be amplified. Also, this interaction of intense thought hologram with space-time matrix may help in memory formation in the knowledge space, and as we have talked about in section 3. So what is resonance magnification? All systems in the universe possess natural frequencies, and when these frequencies are matched by those of the system, large-scale mechanical effects are observed. A classical example is a child on a swing. A slight push at the right time to the swing can make it go higher and higher. Similarly, certain notes played on musical instruments can shatter wine glasses. In the same manner, some of the modern bridges were destroyed when the marching steps of the soldiers on the bridge match the natural frequency of the bridge. All these effects show that an exceedingly small force can create large mechanical changes when the natural frequencies of the system are reinforced by a small mechanical force. This is the genesis of butterfly effect, generally described in chaos theory, and is an outcome of nonlinear dynamics of the system. Thus, a deep thought hologram, soliton, may somehow interact with the space-time matrix in a non-linear way to affect large-scale mechanical changes. We still do not know how this might take place since the natural frequency of space-time matrix is still a mystery, though some work has been done in trying to identify that. This process, however, may be able to explain the movement of physical objects by thought, psychokinesis, and poltergeist phenomena where the presence of a troubled person brings in abrupt movements of the physical objects like stones, furniture, etc. Generally, the troubled person is capable of very strong emotional thoughts. And now I come to my final section, called Mahasamadhi or the final exit. It may also be tempting to speculate whether the deep thought soliton may help a person to leave his body by will. Normally, death happens by old age, disease, or by accident. In these cases, the person has no control over the time or how the death will take place. However, there have been instances like that of Swami Vivekananda and others who have left their body by will. Sometimes it seems that the physical structure of the brain and the body is required to reach the stage of highly nonlinear thought, and once this very stable soliton is achieved, the body's function is over and the liberation of a being from the cycle of birth and death results. Sage Patanjali says that this stage could be achieved by Dharma Megh Samadhi, which is written in the section 429 of his Yoga Sutras. I therefore feel that soliton thought wave may be responsible for Mahasamadhi of great rishis and enlightened souls, which enable them to leave the body at will, guided by the gravity of celestial bodies like sun and stars. This is probably the most economical way, energy wise, to leave the gravity of the earth. It is also very tempting to speculate that production of thought like soliton artificially and its interaction with space time matrix may provide a possible mechanism for teleportation and propulsion for overcoming gravity and help in intergalactic space travel. With this, friends, I come to the end of my book and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. I would still suggest that please go to the link of the book, which is freely available on the internet, and so that you can see what research papers were used in trying to describe the different things in different sections. And I'll be delighted if you can send me your comments, suggestions, etc., on how to improve this book, which I think shows very interesting way on how thought is produced and its interaction with matter. You can send me your thoughts and comments on my email. It is Anil Rajvanshi, ANILRAJVANSHI 5050 at gmail.com. Thank you very much.